Good evening, my loves. I'm back as promised. I hope you guys are well and in good spirits. For those that aren't, you're my prayers and my thoughts as well. And I that pray for better days to come for you. Um, so I tried to give a little time for you guys to watch the show. Um, if you haven't already, there's still time. You can always watch it at any time. I'll be posting segments from the show as well as I break them down bit by bit. But I try to give a little time for you guys to watch to kind of follow me here on who we're dealing with here, my family dynamics. But no worries if you haven't watched it, trust me, there will be plenty of time because I will also be inserting clips in here throughout my story. And we will digest that together. I will take the show and break it down bit by bit so that there's a great understanding. If you have any questions or comments, concerns about anything, feel free to inbox me. My messenger is always open to you, as well as my heart and my ear and my shoulder as well. So it doesn't even have to necessarily be questions or anything of that sort. But if you just need some words of encouragement, you need someone that understands what you're going through, and you just need to vent, whatever. My heart, my ears, my shoulder, and my messenger is open to you as well. So feel free to use that. Once again, you don't have to wait until I open the floor for you to feel comfortable enough to approach. I'm giving that, I'm opening that door, extending my olive branch, as you will. For those who haven't watched the show and looking for it, once again, I've made the post about where you can find it, but I'll also put that here in this video as well on the screen. You can Google it, you can find it on YouTube, and you can also find it on demand if you have cable, things that sort, under the Dr. Phil Show season 18. The titles, once again, for the first episode is called The Wrath of My Mother, Wanda. The second episode is The Good, the Bad, and Wanda's Bipolar. If you're having difficulty finding it, just let me know. Reach out to me. I'll be more than happy to help you with that. Okay, so moving forward, let's get right on into this, shall we? If you're curious as to what I have in my hands, this is my little book of thoughts. I jot down all my unfortunate memories and I place them here in my book. So, because it's a lot, right? So it keeps me organized. And if I remember something, then I'll put it down too. So it kind of keeps my little timeline here as something to refer to as well. And the book, I love this book because it bloomed with grace. So, and that I shall. Anywho, so let's dive right in. So, a lot of people have asked, like, so when is it? When did you start to realize, or what was the time period that you would say that you realized who you were dealing with, that your mother was a narcissist? And the answer to that is that it took my adult years, guys, honestly, because as a kid, I was in the midst of so much toxicness that it was almost like I was immune to it, if it makes sense. Like it was normalized. It wasn't normal, but it was so normalized in there. And I also had my own escapes, to keep my sanity as well. But as far as the dynamics when it comes to my mother and recognizing that took time because once again, as a kid, you want your mommy, right? And I was underneath of her a lot. So when I got a little older and people were like, hey, I think your mom's probably a little jealous of you or things, it was hard for me to accept that part. So of course, it wasn't sinking in for me at that time until I got into my adult years and I start to realize, what I was dealing with. But now that I'm able to process everything and put a name on that, of who my mother is and the dynamics of my family and my father, now I can go back to those times and relive those with you as well. And now that I'm strong enough to do that, I'll share that with you. So I would say that I definitely I started out as a mama's girl. I was the only girl in the household. And so of course I cling to my mom a lot. I was underneath of her a lot. And she would later on use that to her advantage as well. And we'll get to that. But like I wanted to be underneath her. I wouldn't say that my mother did a lot of things with us. She stayed in her room a lot, depression and things of that sort, or just being disconnected now that I know who she is, Back then I saw it as usually depressed or, whatever. It was normal for us to say, hey, we know mom's not probably going to go or not. But I don't remember her being as actively involved with me and my brothers as much as my father was. So I spent a lot of time underneath of her and, watching TV or if she would go out and about, then I would be, things of that sort. So I tried, back then I thought I had a bond with my mom, right? And those are in my much younger years. But as I started to develop into a young lady in my teens is when things started to take a turn with me in the dynamics between her and I and our relationship. So I could recall an instance like, everybody knows that feeling, what it feels like when you have your first little crush and things of that sort. Or if you're a writer, like, you write in your diary. I was a big nerd, still am. And I like to write, and I still do. So it's always been a part of me. I used to write little short stories about my brothers because they were bad, things of that sort. So I wasn't, too far-fetched to say, for me to have a diary. So I remember getting this really cool diary from Scholastic Book Fair, showing my age. I think they still have them. Anyway, and we didn't have all the money in the world. So when I did get a little piece of change, I got me a diary, and that diary was things I just write, little innocent things. Like I wasn't like a troubled child. I had my trauma, but I wasn't I wasn't like out there. I wasn't doing that. I was very this social butterfly. Wasn't as much as an extrovert then. In sports and things, yes, but I was really much to myself. I stayed in my room, a lot. I listened to my music, read my books and stuff. So I would take my diary and I would write about innocent little things that, would be like, oh, what's the cutest things that your mom would want to talk about when you're older type of thing. But with my mother, things were a little different. It was an invasion of my privacy, if you will. Little things like I recall coming home from school and my mother and her mother, my grandmother, she is going to be a part of this too as well, as she plays a major role too in her abuse towards me, and we'll get down to that later on. Anyway, they were I recall them being in a dining area with my diary, and I remember them just laughing, and I saw I saw my little bright yellow diary. You can't miss it, and it's wide open, and they're laughing hysterically, and I'm, mortified, like, crying, and, and as she's reading out loud my diary about, my little crush. I was such a tomboy, y'all, so it wasn't like I was open like the girly girl to talk about boys or anything like that. But when I had my little crush, I was a little tomboy riding on a little huffy bike, on the pegs with this little boy named Francisco up the street, right? So little innocent things like, it's normal. But, things like that to me for a kid that was so like not out there like that, and your mom to do that, and then in front of your grandmother, she just read my whole little life, that I had put in my book out loud, and the fact that me crying wasn't enough to stop her. As I go back and look at that, it was like, yeah, that's not normal. But, I noticed that she would make me the target of these things. This was normal to her to do. Like, I had my first boyfriend, my high school sweetheart. And, you trying to be real, all cute and stuff, it's later in my teens, give me a little ponytail, even though I got hair, you get your little fake ponytail, put it on whatnot, drawstring, and you just want to look your best, you're growing into yourself. This is you finding who you are, finding yourself. Everybody's had their moments, right? And this was my moment, right? And my first boyfriend. So I do remember, it's like any little piece of happiness that involved me, she took that moment to snatch that from me. And back then I didn't really see it in that light. Thought it was just my mom being crazy old mom, but it's really not normal, because now that I see it, I was a target for a long time. I was talking to my old boyfriend outside, and my mother pulled up, she's about to wrap things up so we can go home. And she's seeing me smiling, and I'm happy, the little girly thing, like, oh, okay, well, all right, boo, see you later type of thing, innocence, instead of a normal mother would embrace that, like, wow, my baby girl's growing up. She took that as a moment to steal my little moment, my joy, and she snatched my ponytail off of my head, yeah, in front of my boyfriend. To a lot of people, that wouldn't be a big deal unless you're dealing with my mom. And then there's my mom, okay? So her mission isn't necessarily to be the embarrassing mom like a lot of people say, well, your parents are supposed to be embarrassed. No, there's a difference when you have a mother like mine whose sole mission is just to destroy you, even as a child. Okay, so those are little subtle things that she would do that, but inside it really hurt me, and you took that moment. I was once again mortified and embarrassed. There's a moments like those where it's like, wow, and not even my tears or my embarrassment was enough to stop her. She's running around the yard, laughing hysterically, swinging my ponytail in front of my boyfriend, like, oh, look, I took her hair off, type of thing. This is who I was dealing with as a child. So those are little things that, as far as back as I can recall, like now a lot of things I have been made aware of because of the show. A lot of my family members on my father's side have shared a lot of things with me, and basically made me realize like my whole life is a lie, and we'll get into that too as well. But yeah, those are the little subtle things that they started out as, and then it graduated into bigger things. Okay, so my mother didn't necessarily like me or care enough for me, and was envious of her child even as a kid. But however, she used my quietness and being introvert to her advantage. So later on in years, she had an affair, which you guys will see on the show, amongst multiple, now that I know, multiple affairs. Before that affair, just to give you a glimpse of once again, of who you're dealing with. My mother had a revolving door of men in and out of the house, and when you're a girl, the only girl on top of that, and you're being raised by a mother like that, she didn't necessarily give me the best example of what a woman is supposed to be in a marriage, or just how this supposed to carry yourself because of the things that I've seen. So I've been exposed to watching men going out of the house while my dad was at work, or, if we're home, and, entertaining them in ways. And we're not just talking about pouring tea, and eating crumpets. We're talking about, hey, I'm putting on a whole strip tease for you in the living room. My kids are upstairs, and yeah, you don't even realize that we're watching you. And I could name, till this day, I could name the men that have came out of that house, like down to the last, and give you every full detail to this day. And that is what I was exposed to. Just to show you how far she would go to hide things, and destroy. She would destroy anybody in her path if it meant protecting her image, if you will, even to the men that she's had the affairs with while my father was away at work. We had this one guy that came in there that she had a thing with in the house, and they had sex and things of that sort. And basically she didn't want the word to get back to my father that she was doing this. So instead of telling the truth about, hey, I've been messing around, she destroyed this guy's reputation and said that she was raped, right? And she attempted to file a report to get him sent to jail. This is how far my mother would go. And she does a lot of things. She has burned a lot of bridges, and she has hurt a lot of people amongst the path. And I never thought, even though everything else that she did was wrong, I never really thought that, I would be in that crossfire. But she has no boundaries. And narcissists don't know boundaries. They don't care about boundaries. And I had to learn that now in my 30s. She doesn't care. Anything to save herself. And yeah, so to watch that stuff take place, was like, yeah, I don't know, like what kind of mother I have, like, and, and it was something that she continued for a very, very long time. And so we graduated from bringing the men into the house to venturing outside. Next door neighbor that was married as well and had children, the whole nine. And the extremes that she would go to with this man was crazy, so they didn't leave a trail or phone bill trail. They would use walkie-talkies and excuse me, walkie-talkies and things of that sort. She would send me across the street to the corner store to get money from him. She would take me with her. And at the moment when she started drifting away from the house is when the things that I've been exposed to beyond what I would see in the house would get far worse. So I recall times that she would, groom me, if you will, before coming back to the house or after we leave the house, to make herself, and then have a conversation with me, if you will, to make herself feel justified in what she was doing. So she would do things like she would say she's going grocery shopping and I'm going with Tiffany and we come back with no food. And how do you explain that to your father that he's been waiting all this long for food to be in the refrigerator and there's nothing to put in there because we were not grocery shopping. When indeed your daughter was parked on the side of the grocery store. We were at the grocery store, but parked on the side of the grocery store. And my mother was having sex with the next door neighbor. And she would turn up the volume as if I didn't have eyes to see. So these are the things that I was exposed to. So I had a lot of weight on my shoulders as a child to carry home, being the only one that with the secret, in the household, the carrier, if you will. And I would go home and cry. I would cry myself to sleep every night. And to know that now that I see that, she really didn't have a connection with me. So it was easy for her to bring me along, and expose me to the things that she did, because no caring mother would do that, yet alone have an affair, but if you, wouldn't expose your child to the nonsense. So there was that. And I recall, just needing to escape from that household. My father worked a lot. So he wasn't around for a lot of the stuff that was going on, partaking in the house, but I'm pretty sure that he heard things around town. We lived in a very small town. Now, the next door neighbor that we're speaking of ended up getting her pregnant at the time. So this is how brainwashed my mother has my father. My father had a vasectomy, which I did not know until my 30s, that he had a vasectomy. He had a vasectomy, and she convinced him that she was with child and the child was his. Now, she was with the child. One of those statements is true, but the child was not hers. It's not his. But he went along with it, like this is some miracle child. This is how, how far she goes and how deeply brainwashed he is, right? To take on something like that. So she abandoned us later on down the road. She left us for this man. And to know that, just disappeared. We came home from school one day and my mother was gone. And she cleaned out half the house. We had a 3-story home. She cleared out the entire house and left us basically with nothing. In a letter that's just like, well, I guess the thorn is out your side. And I think she left us a little piece of change, a piece for me and my brothers, like, hey, sorry for the inconvenience knowing your mom, but I'm out, but and she came back, and what I know now is the fact that the only reason why you came back was not for your children, was because you were beaten. My mother came back home with 2 black eyes. So she showed up to my school like that with sunglasses, after being gone for a long time and nobody knew where she was, right? And it was then where things really got turned up after that when she came back, because it was a lot for me to carry. So before she came back, my brother and I basically I talked to them like, hey, this is a lot on me. I don't know if you guys are aware, but mom's cheating on dad and this and that. Like, whew, feels good to let somebody know, because it's a lot for a child to process and keep for herself. So I was stressed, I couldn't focus in school. It's a lot for a child to carry. So it got to my dad and I was relieved. I let him know. And so when she came back and got word that, hey, the only person in the house that knew the secret, you had to say something, and she made me pay for that for a long time after that. So not only did I have a jealous mother, but now on top of that, she's resenting me for her bad deeds, for her wrongdoings, and making me feel like I was responsible for her getting in trouble or whatever, but she wasn't done yet. My mother went back to went back to this man, would still continue the affair with this man, which you guys will see in the Dr. Phil show as well. She leased a whole house outside the county, way in the boonies somewhere with this guy. And they got caught by my father. My father ended up assaulting the guy. They had a fight. He went to jail the whole nine, right? Well, that wasn't enough for my father to leave. So he ended up saying, hey, by the way, I'm going to pack you guys up, and we're moving to the country, right? We're going to move right on over there in that same house that your mother, that I beat your mother's side boyfriend within. And then, hey, by the way, I'm moving you guys away from all your friends and everybody else that you basically grew up with since kindergarten. And I begged to stay in with my school. These are people that I've known forever. It's a lot to deal with in high school now. I'm a high schooler. Why? This is crazy. So he tried to keep us there as long as he could. And my mother came out to the school and I got called to their office and was like, yeah, hey, by the way, pack your stuff up. You're moving with me. So once again, as I look back at that too, now, as much as I used to be so protective of my father, I realized how much he didn't protect us, in the sense of asking us how we felt about things, so easily uprooting your children, for something that they weren't responsible for, right? Not considering our feelings. So I realized on his hand how selfish he was. And it took me some time to grasp that one too with my dad, because my dad was my hero. But looking back at things, he's played a great deal in this as well. He's just as bad as my mother. And that's a hard pill to swallow, because he was all I had. Anyway, so I went to the school. We didn't stay there long. Made friends, and then poop. Oh, by the way, hey, not knowing then that your mother basically can't deal with life here, that she's burnt some bridges, a lot of bridges. She's embarrassed herself. She's humiliated me in marriage, whatnot. We're moving to Georgia. So once again, we're being moved. Now, in the midst of that, my mother was still having affairs. But this time she had an affair with a young woman. Now, I was not aware that this woman was my age, a year older than me, if you will. So we were planning. They had made the decision. Hey, we're moving to Georgia, right? So we moved to before the move, we move everything out of the house, whatnot, until they're ready to pull the trigger and go ahead and head down south. I stayed with my grandmother, which is her mother, and I stayed with my mom. So I stayed over there with her. And then the boys, my brothers, stayed with my father at his mother's house. My grandmother's on my dad's side house, right? So for that time, until it was time for us to make the move. Now, that time period, my mother formed a relationship with this young lady that I know now to be a year older than me. We were kids. And I noticed that she was on the phone a lot. I mean, a lot. Like, you know the difference. Like, I wasn't a stupid kid. You know the difference between, hey, girl, how you doing? And then there's, the boo-loving voice. Everybody got the boo-loving voice you turn on. And she had her boo-loving voice on. And I don't think she was talking to my daddy. Yet alone did I realize that she was talking to a woman. So, but I knew her name because she said her name a lot. And so, with that being said, she got a message in the mail from this lady. It was a 4 or 5 page letter, and I opened it, curious kid, right, because of the name and because of what I found to be strange, and it was very explicit, about she was in love with my mom and all the things she wanted to do to her. It was very explicit. So I glued it back, the envelope back, and I act like I never touched it. But having that in the back of my mind. So she decided to drag me to go meet this lady. And once again, I'm the cover, the alibi. Hey, bringing a kid, dad's not going to really question that. Got your daughter with me, So we go up there. I greet her as I meet this young lady, and I greet her as Miss insert name. I won't disclose her name, but calling her Miss the whole time. And we stay at the house and things of that sort. And that night in particular, she spoke to everything at me as a kid. Like, to me, I love music, so she had music, and she was more fortunate than what I was, so she had the Jordans, and so those things intrigued me. So that was her way to get me away from, my mother, and to keep me occupied. Now, at the time, she was there, she put me in a room. I had school the next day, so I was going to go to. I had picture day, as a matter of fact, and we were way away. We were far out, so I had to be up and early to get to school on time. So you think you staying the night at someone's house, your mom's going to stay in the same room as you, right? No, I guess I fell asleep and thinking that she would follow soon after a while. Well, I got up in the morning and my mother wasn't there. I got up and I looked around and I'm like, hey, where's my mom at? And I'm calling her name. I go downstairs to the basement, everywhere. I covered all avenues except for one room in particular. So I checked this room and I go in there and there's my mom. But she's in the bed with Miss, insert your name there. Nobody's clothed. They're wrapped in the sheets and they're in bed together. Now, for a child to see that, yet alone on top of all the other things that I've seen, to see now it's like, okay, we're coming from men to women now too. So that's more things I'm storing in my head, and that's more weight for me to carry home, and it was a lot. And not only was she brave enough to bring me there and for me to see that, she acted like it didn't happen. And she also somehow convinced my father to bring this young lady with us down south, to live with us. Now that I know all the dynamics of this sick relationship now, as a kid, I was like, as an adult now, I'm like, how could my father allow that to happen with this young? And I'm thinking like, oh, it makes sense. Maybe she talked to the mother and the mother was unaware and gave permission, like she's some troubled child, right? And she needs to go somewhere outside of there to grow, whatnot. And that's how she got down south. Because I'm certain, like, hey, I love your daughter and she's underage. Can she come with me? I'm pretty sure that wasn't the case. So I'm once again holding the secret. I'm holding this secret inside that my mother's having a affair with this lady that I didn't realize was the same age as me, until we moved down south. So we moved down south, and it was then that I stopped referring to her as Miss Jessica as I'm walking to school with her to get enrolled in school with her, and realizing, hey, you coming to this school too? Wait a minute, you don't have your degree? Like, your diploma? Like, no. So Miss such and such is not Miss such and such. You could drop that title. She's actually in a grade up from you. Wow. Like, as a kid processing that for a moment, like, my mother is messing with an underage girl. And once again, I held the secret and nobody else in the house knew. And it was then that I realized that she also put her before me, and as everything else, her living in a household wasn't enough. She had forgot all about me. So of course, in my rage, and I resented this girl, now that I know, not the woman, but this girl, for staying here, because now I know you're having an affair. I've seen you guys together, and now you're living in my home, and now my mother doesn't really fool with me. So I kind of like blurted it out one day, and I had a moment with this girl. I lashed out on her, like, I know what you're doing. So my dad hears it, and he's like, what are you talking about? And I repeat myself. So once again, this is where I'm going to stop and pause and tell you, listen and take note of who you're dealing with. Now, recall before that I told you before that my mother had attempted to get somebody else sent to jail because she didn't want to fess up to her wrongdoings. So this will repeat itself with this young lady. Instead of that, she managed to convince the mother to send her to the psych ward. And not only to the psych ward, she groomed my younger sibling, for my sister, to say that she was basically molesting her. And my sister's very young then. She was a baby. And so that got her taken out of the household and put into a psych ward at the time. So how do you go to school and explain that to your classmates and stuff when they ask, where's your other sister at? The sister that your mom's messing with. And you're like, oh, she's in a crazy house. I don't know how else to tell you that. How do you deal with that? All of those things that you're carrying in your mind and having to explain to people, and it's like, what? Wait a minute, psych ward. And I still, honestly, to this day, I don't have a clue where she is and how she's doing. But let's just say that was the last time we made one visit to that psych ward to see this young lady, and my mother, of course, didn't attend because she's the one that put her there. And it was the last time that we seen her. I don't know anything about where she is and how she's doing. I hope she's well, and I hope she's healed too, because she was a victim in herself too, regardless of the relationship they had. She was a child too, and my mother knew better. So I pray healing over her, and that she's well and okay as well, despite all that transpired. So these are little things, and as I got older, at that moment, I was like, I gotta get out of here. Like, I've held on to so much, and then the abuse, the physical abuse that started taking place because of her resentment towards me and the jealousy. So now we have, once again, not just jealousy before the affairs. Now we have resentment. Once again, reiterating it to you guys, there's now resentment towards me, because I messed up her good things, her affairs that she was having. So that made her despise me even more. So she came for me a lot when my father wasn't around, like accusing me of things, little stupid things, like maybe she forgot her password to her computer, and she would approach me while my dad would sleep or something, and I'm like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I would never do that, and slap me, like, out of nowhere. And then when she didn't feel satisfied with the reaction she got from me, which was just me sitting there, like, oh, okay, this is unnecessary, are you done yet, type of thing, and in the midst of tears. So she wanted to, I guess I was supposed to just be fearful of her, and because I stood my ground in that moment, it really infuriated her enough to hit me again, slapping me and things of that sort, and punching me, pulling my hair, and to the point where we're talking about pulling my braids out of my scalp, type of thing. And in self-defense, I had no other choice. So I remember one time I bit her, and I bit her on her breast. And instead of owning up to that moment, she ran around and told everybody else like I was this horrible child, that I bit her, and she has the mark to prove it, and that I'm this out of control kid. So she started painting an image about me at a very young age. There was a lot of physical abuse with my mother when it came to me. She had no problem with that. The emotional abuse was 10 times worse, let me tell you, than the physical. Neither is acceptable, but mentally she really screwed with me. She would do a lot of things when she wasn't satisfied with me, but making snarl remarks about me. My mother's called me a bitch so much. Like, I told the producers on the show, she called me a bitch so much I thought it was my name on my birth certificate. Like, it's like that was my name. Like, it's not funny, but it's like, that's what it is. So I even knew when she was gonna call me it. Like, it was her go-to for me, to call me out of my name. So as I got further, I was like, I was in Georgia then, and I was like, I gotta make my way out of here. So I decided to go back up north and finish. I got my dad's blessing to finish school my senior year back up north. So I finished there, and I was determined not to go back home. Like, I was determined not to come home. I did not want to go back to that place. So I did what I had to do. I followed behind my high school sweetheart, and I ended up going to Bowie State University. I was determined I was going to do something with my life to keep me away, anything to keep me away from her. And unfortunately, I wasn't raised in a rich family. I wasn't silver spoon fed or yet alone have caring parents enough to care about my education. But so I had to pack it up after my sophomore year and go on down south and figure it out. So I went back, and what's your next game plan? Like, I was determined I was not going to stay in that house. So I started to entertain the idea of joining the service so I could finish my education. My dad was thrilled. I wanted to go Army at first. He discouraged that because, you know, he was prior military and he was Army and he didn't want his daughter in that branch. So I went Navy. So that's what, you know, got me to go to the Navy. But I was on it. Like, I mean, I went to the recruiting station. They asked me, you know, once I got processed, and you know, it was, you know, go time. They were like, when do you want to leave? As soon as I can. I want to be on the first train smoking. Like, I can't stay here. Like, I don't. So once I got my date, I was in a delayed entry program called it DEP. Basically just waiting to go to boot camp for about 6 months. And those 6 months were like hell. So I bottled up my pain. I bottled up all my emotions for those 6 months, and like, you're almost out of here, girl. Like, just keep it together. Keep it together. And I did. I managed. So when I went to boot camp, before I went to boot camp, actually, I wrote a really long note to my mom, like just dishing everything out to her about how she made me feel, about the abuse, the physical, mental, and emotional abuse that I endured with her. You know, basically saying like, this is me crying out to you for, you know, your love, and not understanding why you do what you do, you know. And she didn't read that for about almost until I was like 2 years into my service. She decided to read that, and that says a lot about, she has an idea about what it was. It says a lot, because usually a normal mother would open it like, oh, you know, maybe it's just sweet. My mother knew there were bad things in there, and that's how she was aware of what she was doing. She knew what she was doing because she didn't read it for about 2 years. And she finally came to me about it, and it was like on the phone one day. I was out away, and you know, talked about that, but wasn't enough for her to change. Little did I know that she was just turning up the heat on me. And is when I went to the service, you know, and I started to talk about these things. A lot of people used to say, your mom's jealous of you. Like my aunt said, your mom's jealous of you. No, like, there's no way my mom could be jealous of me. Like, I don't understand. Like, you know, maybe it's something else. Like, I don't know what it is, but you know, it can't be jealousy. Well, I would say I started to learn that that was the case. And when I got into the service, I was away. I used to send my whole paycheck home. I remember not, you know, as a child growing up, there's times where we didn't have food in the house, and when my mother abandoned us, we didn't have anything. I remember riding bicycles, you know, in the snow for miles on the highway just to go to Food Line, to the grocery store with our backpacks with our dad, just to put food in the house, you know, putting food in our backpacks and riding all the way back in the snow. These are the things that I endured, you know, and it was done at our expense because of my mother and, you know, an enabling father. So thinking about those things, I didn't want my sister to go through you know, to experience the things I had to experience, what it was like to have a cold house, no heat in the house, things of that sort, no food in the house. So I would send my whole little check in the Navy at the time to them. I would give my all, and like saying like, hey, I'm a good daughter, you know, I'm taking care of my family, which is not my responsibility, but hey, this is me attempting to get my mother's love and attention. And I thought that I was doing a good job. You know, I was making my dad proud, my mom proud. I'm in the service. I went to college. You know, I'm continuing my education in the service. Little what I know is that it was just, it would never be enough, we would say. So that's just give me a glimpse. Now, the second part that we'll discuss is what took place in that time and me being in service. And you'll see bits and pieces of that in the story as well on the Dr. Phil show about the accusations that were made and how that transpired. Okay, my loves. So for now, take all of that in, and I will be back on here again with part 2 about me now being in the Navy. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to inbox me. It's open at any time. I love you guys. Thanks for watching. Thank you for your love and your consistency and your support. It means more than you know. Thank you for supporting me on my journey to bring awareness and healing and understanding to those, and bring a voice to the voiceless. I appreciate it. It means more than you ever know. Once again, my heart, my shoulder, and my ear, my inbox is open to you guys. Until next time, be blessed. Goodbye.